add to this conversation. So the moment you feel a very strong urge to react to what you're hearing is probably the moment you need to take this step, these stairs, join us, and be part of this panel. So this is a sort of invitation, open panel. It's a friendly panel, so don't be shy. All right. So where should I'll sit here. Just to make sure, are we streaming? We're good? Awesome. Okay, so guys, please introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Benarach, CEO of and co-founder of InversedTech. We've been working on a few projects around zero knowledge and MPC, specifically also focusing on identity question. We've been working with the World Foundation and the Tools for Humanity to implement a bit of sort of a privacy and scalable version of their iris matching protocol, and it's been quite an incredible challenge. Something pretty important also as a product in the context of the future of kind of multi-AI agent sort of digital world that we're moving in. And
so that's WorldCoin, right?
Yeah, it's called World Foundation.
World Foundation.
Yeah, and yeah, so now I'm happy to be here, and hopefully I can shed some light on some ideas we've been having at Inverse.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Almost.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Alex. I'm doing research at Rarimo, and we are working on the intersection of zero knowledge and machine learning. So probably 1.5 years ago, we created this stuff related to zero knowledge proof step and passport data. And right now we are extending that with tools that allow you to work with your biometry. So that's it.
All right, so let's double click on that. You come from an organization called Rarimo that decided to start its identity journey with passports. Is that correct?
We started as an aggregator for, historically, traditionally the first tools for identity were based on some centralized oracles and verifiable credentials. It's, for example, how Private ID works right now. And we started as an aggregator for these different providers. Then, we launched like the centralized approach based on passport data. And right now we're switching to biometry stuff.
So when you mentioned a year ago there was a work on using this technology in it was in digital protest, is that correct?
Yeah. We launched several solutions for oppositioners in different countries, and we allowed people to vote anonymously with their passports. So you can prove that you have a specific nationality, you're adult, your passport isn't expired. And without revealing your personal data, you can vote or like support particular option or participate in some protest.
So if I have a passport that has a chip, right?
Yes.
I can use, is this an Android or an iPhone app? Both?
Exactly, yeah.
And I put the passport underneath. What happens technically?
Yeah, your chip includes all data about yourself, and that is signed by the government. So, for example, RSA or CDSA signature. You can prove that your passport is signed by one from the list of eligible public keys, and then passport includes several data groups and secure object data that includes the hash values of these data groups. And you can prove that particular data is included into the hash that is included into the object that is signed by the particular government. So yeah, this is quite complex stuff because we have the single standard, but from country to country, different hashing algorithms can be used, different signatures can be used. So that's quite challenging, like to implement that in circuits. But anyway, right now we are covering more than 90% of what called passports.
Well, what did you use to implement it in concretely the schemes?
Circom, but right now we are switching to NOR.
Got it.
This feels like a bit of a kind of shed of light in the hope of having some kind of actual identity system, because like today, if you think about how identity works, like it works completely limited by how much the larger companies that manage more of the internet are allowing us to do or not to do, right? And I'm a little bit more on the pessimistic side at this point. Also, I think that like here with cryptography, we can do a lot if it's more, let's say, sophisticated schemes that enable you to prove things about our identity and whatnot. But I also don't think that zero knowledge is enough, because sometimes we need to aggregate data across different parties and so on, and we know that if you do that, you need to probably use some kind of MPC or co-snarks or things like that are being also developed.
And in a way, what you're describing is subversive, right? You're using something that was meant for one use, and you're using it for another use. Did you go away from that to biometrics because you didn't want to subvert passports, or because biometrics are a better way to attach an identity to a person?
There's not a better way, that's just another, what the identity is. There's a lot of different statements. So the passport is a statement issued by our government that we are like belonging to a particular nationality, or I don't know. Our biometry is like another statement that's nature provided to us. And what the identity is, it's like a lot of real world data you can transfer into, if we're talking about digital identities, a lot of real world data that can be transferred into blockchains, but we are provable way. So with the passport, that's like simple. You can prove cryptographically that the particular signature like is correct. With biometric stuff, it's quite complex, because you're working not with deterministic algorithms, you're working with some proximity. But anyway, you can use this like intersection of zero knowledge and machine learning to prove some statements about existing physical objects and put them into the blockchain.
So you've been helping this work also with the World Foundation, right? The core of their identity work is this with the iris. Is that correct?
Correct. So they're really working towards proof of humanity, in that sense, to have a well-defined database of unique human users, right? And that's extremely important when we're talking about this sort of AI agent economy, where you're going to have different AI agents doing different aspects of your interactions with the internet, right? I think there was a really good talk by Meredith, the president of the Signal Foundation, about the challenges that these can bring, because now we're exposing our data and our sort of identities to different companies for different things, but with AI agents, you're going to end up doing sort of, this AI agent needs access to your calendar, and this one to your credit card, and this one to different aspects, only to buy the ticket, the airplane ticket, right, that you were talking about. And the question that I'm kind of like asking people here is sort of like, what does it look like, and can an AI keep a secret, right? Like, of course, like, the answer trivially is sort of no, because once you give it, it's like, okay, but what does it mean? Like, how much access can this AI agent have to a specific secret that you don't want it to overuse, that you don't want it to overshare, et cetera, et cetera?
So if we have a technology to bring the real objects on chain, and we have a technology to bring, artificial brains to limit the risk of them wandering all over, I would say that another aspect of identity is what people are doing online is defining their identity. The traces, the digital traces of what they're doing, is in a way your identity. And companies almost don't really care about your name and your address. They care to pull you together in a lookalike pool. So you could say that that what you really would want to what really constitutes you and your identity when you're online is the things that you've done maybe with your browser. So I'm tying it a bit to what we just saw in the demo. If users are able to surf to the websites they interact with and then collect pieces of these interactions as proofs that they've been online doing something, but they have the control of when to use those proofs, and they can aggregate traces of their wandering around the digital world, aggregate it with their own consent, decide what I'm showing to who and how to assemble it and what to present to yet a new website. The identity becomes not just your iris or your physical self, but also what do you choose to aggregate, and you need to prove those pieces of interactions with websites using these techniques such as TLS notarization. So we end up with basically 3 different ways, right? We have a physical proof of an object in the world. Even government signed that they saw your body, like they identified that you were present when they gave you the passport. We have the identities that come from maybe just interactions that are trying to be anonymous, like you said, agents. And we have our digital identities as people interacting that also assemble what we really are online, and we need control over that. Now there's a missing chair here, so you're soon going to be hearing from Sofia. So Sofia has arrived to Sofia to talk about the Brave browser, and what Brave is now trying to do is give gestures to users that are using this browser to have control over these interactions online and use these TLS notarization techniques to assemble information.
I think just to build on that a bit, I think there is thank you. There's a powerful question here around defining identity, right? Like it's what you're saying. Like, not all of the things I do based on my curiosity online are defining me and my identity, right? Like maybe we should think about more about like the values that represent me, right? Or the, let's say, communities or subgroups that I want to identify with. That's maybe more of what identity. That's 2 types of identity, and then like me as a persona individual, name, age, demographics, information that are like kind of unchangeable, quote unquote, right? Like, and I say quote unquote because of course you can change your name, but like once you change your name, that's your new name. So that's like, you know, it's what defines you. And I think it's very important to have choice over the aspects that define you in that context of identity. But there is also a question then that says, okay, like if you change your name, like you need to make sure you have the cryptographic tools to make sure you can point and re-reference all the information and data, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very important challenge.
Yeah, you can add that everything you can collect in the digital form can be used for different criteria. So, for example, nobody cares what is your name. Organizations care that, for example, you're not included in OFAC list. And for this, you can use this OFAC list as a criteria. And that's a public. You can represent that as a tree, for example, I don't know, sparse Merkle tree. And then you can create a proof of non-membership in this tree. And if there is a way of how you can convert this data into provable way and reuse that as a criteria, it resolves a lot of problems with your personal data leakage. But yeah, that's a good question of how to digitize everything properly. Because yeah, we spent a lot of time to support these passports. We are spending a lot of resources right now to support like very small biometry features. But anyway, if you want to like to cover everything with zero knowledge proofs, everything with provability, I don't know how much time it will take.
At some point, the dream of using zero knowledge proofs to prove that you're legit in a transaction, we went about and tried to do distributed KYC, which is something that naively we all think should happen. If a third party can verify that my name is or is not in a list, then I can also verify it on myself and generate a proof of that. And we went about actually in Indonesia trying to create, or was it Philippines? Trying to create a sort of joint KYC where one side proves that the person is legit, and the other just accepts that proof. And we ended up with a barrier, which is, no, there's the governments want redundancy in checking, so they're making everybody check from the name itself, rather than people proving that they're entering a transaction from a legit place. I wonder if that was enough of triggering words to invite a person that knows a lot about KYC and zero knowledge proofs. I'm looking at two people here. Okay. All right. Unlocked.
Okay. I mean, the fundamental thing we're missing here is the two different kinds of identity. There's like ambient, like what your reputation is, all you're a Sybil, who you are on the web. And that's still useful for KYC, for things like theft prevention, where you just want to do reputation for accounts. But then there's the government side of it, where you need government IDs. If government banking requires IDs, you're going to need passport proofs, right? Other stuff, you can start doing the interesting things you were talking about, where we prove you have an Uber rideshare history or an airplane history or any number of other things. But you have to think about what the root of trust is and what people want.
So what did you build?
I've done papers on all of these things. I think you wanted Iran to talk about what he specifically built, which is a different company.
Yeah. I know that you've spent a lot of time trying to codify what these regulators are after, and I was wondering where did you hit a barrier with dealing with digital identity there?
Well, I mean, for that you're going to need actual passports.
Passports.
You're going to need actual physical identity documents that you convert over, right? If you're trying to do OFAC proofs, right? If your requirement is check that you're not on an OFAC list, you've got to have an identity document. That's just reality. The more interesting bit is a whole bunch of harms mitigation things for bridges and such, which maybe don't need that kind of level of things, because like normal accounts on Ethereum don't have KYC in that sense.
Are we doing a good enough job today requiring identity online from at bridges or other places to avoid huge amounts of theft or?
Let me phrase this answer very carefully.
No, since you're here, I cranked the controversy.
Yeah, I mean, the jury is, I think, still out on that. My understanding across the entirety of industry is there are different bridges with different norms, and I think the majority of the bridges don't have any, they're just free fall, right? So there are bridges on, say, Alio that have delay requirements, or maybe KYC requirements on there, I forget. But the majority of funds aren't going through these kind of things. So we don't know yet. There's this experiment that's sort of going on where there are various KYC systems on chain, but the reality of the matter is most fraud isn't even like in something like Tornado Cash or privacy pools. It's like chain hopping to ThorChain, for example.
All right, so for those who don't know you, you've been for years working on fully anonymous coins, right?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Ian Myers. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland. I was one of the co-inventors of Zcash, Zexy, Alio, a couple of other things. And yeah, I've been working on how to build a privacy-preserving version of Bitcoin since 2013, and then we switched to Zcash and a bunch of other stuff. For those of you who don't know me, I don't think Monero has much privacy.
Maybe a word on Tor chain, because you mentioned it. I picked this example because it has a lot of volume recently, right?
Yeah. So a long discussion I've been having with various people of what does actual fraud on chain look like, and we, in terms of ZK people and people working in privacy preserving payments, tend to think about this in terms of things like Tornado Cash and Zcash and Monero and whatever. But the reality is, and again, I'm not actually an expert in this, I talk to people, the majority of illicit flows of funds aren't going through any of these things. It's you chain hop from one chain to another fast enough that the various people who are following it don't have tooling, they can't get in touch with people in time to ban it, and then the money's gone. And that's what most things go through now. So when you ask me what does reality look like for KYC and identity, well, we haven't gotten to the point where attackers are putting most of the money through those tools.
Is that a feature of our blockchain world and cryptocurrency, that identity is the key that you have, and by default we don't ask anyone for their iris or their physical self?
I mean, it is a feature of the current system we have, to artfully dodge your question.
I think in general, like what companies or governments are interested is kind of, let's put it in the terms of a risk factor, right? That's what really identity means for them. In terms of ads and Instagram and Meta and whatever, it's more around, are you enough on the fence to either purchase this product or to click like, right, on this specific post? But in terms of government entities or whatnot, is it like, are you passing the threshold of risk in order to get a loan, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges we have in the context of identity is not enough, it's not only, and it's not enough to say, well, I choose what information you can get or use about me, but also the question of what are you going to do with this information, right? Like Dan beautifully mentioned today this LIME algorithm for risk scoring and whatnot. And usually this risk scores and credit scoring and whatnot is very private. Like these companies don't want to tell you how they're computing this score about your data. Or, you know, the Instagram won't tell you what is the underlying algorithm for them to choose your interest and give you pop-up exactly what you're... And so it's a big challenge. And I think that's, you know, the classification topic that you were mentioning before. Like, how are we being classified in these buckets without us knowing, right? And that's why, like, we know and we say that, like, these companies kind of know who we are better than we do, right, about ourselves.
If we do end up with, you know, stable coins all over the place, replacing just regular cash transfer, the current state of affairs is that everything is visible, and you're going to end up doing these this bucketing. How is it that has never been a problem to anyone so far, and we're not hearing, you know, there's such and such that happened because, I don't know, USDC is not private? Like, people are not getting, it seems like people are not getting doxed today from their movements of USDC, even though they are presumably leaking a lot of their identity with these movements, right?
So I think there's a difference between cryptocurrency today and 10 years ago, where, for better and worse, everyone operated in this world where everything's public and they kind of live with it. And if you look at the growth market for stablecoins in 5-10 years, that's not just people using it to jump between exchanges and do arbitrage. It's people who wanted no exposure to cryptocurrency but live somewhere where they want access to stable dollars or euros. And then you start looking at the real sort of problems we've all been talking about for 10 years of actual economic activity. When it's all over in cryptocurrency land, it's sort of its own thing. So it's a different market, in my mind. You're going to start seeing these problems as we see this growth of stablecoins outside of, like, just moving back and forth for DeFi kind of things.
So has it started?
Anecdotally, yes. I mean, I've heard stories of payroll providers who do actual stablecoin settlement having the classic problem we've all given in these slides as examples of, you pay person A, you pay person B goes, why am I getting paid less? Because they can backtrack it. But that's anecdotal. anecdotal. I don't know about pervasive data.
So if we need to bet like a few years ahead, is privacy for your identity transacting going to take off? And if so, or not? And if it is going to be used, what is your bet on specifically the technology? Because we're a standardization workshop where we try to make bets on what has reached a level of progress that's good enough to think of standardizing. So which is it going to be more and more deployed? And if so, which tech? I know it's a hard.
I think that's very hard. But I think with Passport it's done. At least we have 3 teams. It's Open Passport, ZK Passport, and Rarimo. And yeah, probably we're using the same approach here. And it can be standardized very quickly. Everything is related to your financial history, to aggregation different proofs using, I don't know, ZK-TLS and combining that with biometry, etc., etc., etc. Some of these things are very difficult for people psychologically. And also we met that in the case with the passport, so you cannot guarantee, so it's very hard to psychologically to scan your passport than to scan your face because you cannot trust that there is no leakage of this data. And probably, it's not possible to explain that to usual people only from mass perspective of view. And there is a question how to find a way. So the technical standardization is only one part. Another part is how to prove to usual people that this process is secure.
But on the one hand, they don't care about privacy today, and on the other hand, they do care about privacy?
It was a situation when we launched this protest for Russians. And
so that's an election, a shadow election that you organized?
It's only participation in, we are against the current politics. And a lot of people are afraid. And you can say there is no data leakage, everything is calculated on your local device. But anyway, psychologically, that's very hard to understand that for usual people.
Yeah, I think things get very real when you have to scan an identity document. That said, much as I really like the passport work, and I really do, I don't think either of these are going to work very well for sort of KYC AML on chain. Because look, there are 2 sides of KYC AML. There's the regulatory requirements, and then there's the you need to be able to effectively prevent stolen funds from being laundered, right? And at some level, that's the Wild West in cryptocurrency of how you have to do it and whether the regulations actually apply. But you do sort of need to figure out how to do it if you're trying to be a legitimate business. The problem with passports and the problem with iris scans, if you trust this piece of hardware on the root of trust, which is the whole question, is it's very easy for the level of attackers we're talking about to buy legitimate passports or to buy legitimate iris scans, right? These work nicely for proofs of humanity if you want to get rid of AI bots, again, if you trust the root of trust. But for nation-state actors trying to launder stolen funds, they will just get a legitimate identity. And so whatever happens is going to be something much more sophisticated that has to deal with this OODA loop of disrupting attackers and reacting to them getting around your system and some circle like that. It's not going to be, here's a KYC token with a hand stamp that I did a passport, because you'll go buy a legitimate set of passports or a legitimate set of eyeballs in anywhere, well, not anywhere, but certain parts of the world. And that'll get you past the system. So we won't be able to use this stuff to solve these kind of problems.
So the first place we're going to see wide-scale identity will be where the stakes are lower and you don't need to prove that you're not a thief of crypto.
Yeah, I mean, just to make the obvious point, everybody who checked into a hotel here, right? You handed the hotel your passport, right? The moment we start using KYC, passport data as KYC, you're going to create a market for the hotel clerk to surreptitiously scan your passport, right? You can do some facial recognition systems and maybe it'll work for low stakes, but this is not going to be the thing we use to solve at least Lazarus group level problems.
Yeah, I mean, you're really touching upon like this, like a very inherent conflict of what it means to have identities online, which is exactly what like the governments have gone super strict on, and we are trying to fight that sort of strictness or like extremist, right, like mentality of like, we don't want any fraud, but like we don't want being spied on and have our privacy revealed, right? Like that there is this balance is like, okay, how do we actually use cryptography to find the right balance, quote unquote? I think these are very good efforts that are going on, and we'll see evolutions of all of that. I do think in my vision, what I see is sort of like, there is sort of what I would call as like an identity portal, so to speak, that is like not dependent on any kind of product or company or service, and you interact with those services through this portal as kind of like a gated way of, right, protected by cryptography, etc.
So let me ask you a question for the audience. Those of you who are not in the camera frame, who here thinks that self-sovereign identity is kind of a BS buzzword? Okay, I would normally have put up my hand, but I'm in the camera frame. But in all honesty, I think it's going to be something like what you described, which is honestly something like what the self-sovereign identity people did, which is something honestly like what you were describing earlier. There's going to be some aggregate notion of you have all these signals, passport, eyeballs, history of whatever, and that's going to be your identity. It's just going to be, that alone is not going to be enough to do meaningful theft prevention or KYC. There's going to be some weird set of fraud protocols on top of it. And then we are probably beyond ZK and into weird MPC, FHE, TE stuff.
Okay, so we actually have a perfect segue here because one of the most, like I said, one of the most advanced companies trying to bring this kind of portal and actually include pretty sophisticated cryptography in their product, which is a browser, is Brave. So we're going to say thank you to our panel and prepare to learn about that product. Thank you.